Hello world, it's Rational Pie and we're back here today with our NBA Conferences project. This is our 10th episode. I think we might only have one or two left depending on how far we get in our next one. But there's not going to be a whole lot of changes in our code today, but there is a couple that I wanted to point out. One of them being we're going to implement our heuristic now. Now what is our heuristic? Well, I'll go over that later, but we're going to implement it in not a standard way. We're not only going to add it to our path cost, but we're just going to go ahead and take the square of it here, and then add it to the square of the difference of the longitude and latitude, and then take the square root of the whole thing. That's what's going to create our path cost from one node to another. So our flowchart hasn't changed at all because there doesn't need to be, but since we're just adding the heuristic to this right here. And then we're going to go down to the bottom, and something interesting I kind of found out by accident was if you comment out this save as line, then it'll actually just create a general workbook just as a sheet 1, unnamed, unsaved, and then you save it to yourself wherever you want it to be, which is actually kind of what I was looking for. So you don't need this line here to create an Excel spreadsheet. All that does is save it to a specific place. So I should have gone over that in my Excel video. I'm sorry that I didn't, but now you kind of know. Alright, so I went ahead and ran the code, put all the information in, and the information was based off of this spreadsheet here, which has the longitude, latitude, and it's, the heuristic is based off the 5-year win percentage. And the heuristic is based on this formula right here, and that's something that I just put together. What I did was I found the maximum and minimum of the longitude and latitude, figured out the difference between them, and figured out the average of that. Oops. And then I wanted our heuristic to be less than 30% of an impact on our path cost. And so that's where this all came in. And that's what we ended up with. That's our heuristic for each of the nodes. And I would like to remind everybody that the heuristic only applies to when node 1 goes to node 2. That's what adds to the path cost from 1 to 2. So like let's say if we're going from Oklahoma City to Los Angeles, then the Los Angeles heuristic is being involved in the path cost. But if we're going from Los Angeles to Oklahoma City, it's going to be the Oklahoma City's heuristic cost that's going to be added to the path cost. So let's go ahead and see what ends up happening. This is what's produced. We got a whole nice 870 paths here, and then I ran our VBA script, and that's what organizes them into each node, and each node only has 5 paths that are utilized. Now we are going to be fleshing out some of these things, but all of these paths will be utilized in one form or another. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens. And in our last video we found out that the eye test that we originally did just based on geography ended up producing the best divisions originally. So 1 through 5, 5 through 10, or 6 through 10, so on and so forth. They all were grouped pretty well together. But here we found out that 1 through 5 and 26 through 30 ended up being the appropriate divisions. However, Dallas got replaced with San Antonio in this division, and down here we had a couple changes. So where it's Orlando, Miami, Philadelphia, Newark, and Brooklyn, and I'll show kind of why that is in just a second. But as you can see here, it was a lot harder to figure out what divisions each team needed to go into because there's a lot more variability based on the heuristic. For example, number 11, which is San Antonio, only had one other city that had it in its top 5, and number 23, which is Boston, didn't have any teams that had it in its top 5. So I had to kind of estimate where the best places for those teams would be. So let's go ahead and take a look at what ends up happening. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. And it actually does kind of make sense. You have the coastal teams together. These 5 teams are not irrationally put together. These 5 teams pretty close together. Now here's where everything got kind of weird and where the heuristic really kind of took off was these Florida teams ended up getting paired with Philadelphia and 2 New York teams. And that's just because the New York teams ended up being really bad over the last 5 years. And honestly, so did the 2 Florida teams except for Miami. So it's Miami and a bunch of kind of horrible teams up here. And so they all got grouped together based because the heuristic wanted to pull it all to Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia pulled in the 2 New York teams. And that's the way that it was all meshed together. Now these 5 teams, the ones in yellow, which you can't really read, because I'm stupid, ended up being okay, and then these 5 teams right here are right next to each other. So overall, I'd say this is a pretty good estimation on a good division structure within the NBA conferences. Now, if the NBA wanted to keep 2 conferences, I would suggest maybe having these 3 divisions here being the Western Conference, and then having the other 3 in the Eastern Conference. But I personally like the idea of just having 6 divisions, and then the top 16 teams based on record would be in the playoffs. But that's not my decision. We're just trying to find a way to optimize the division structure. And I think if this was the case, I think we did a pretty damn good job at it. So, as I mentioned, there's only a few teams that ended up changing divisions. And even with our eye test, we found out that Minnesota did not fit in with Denver, Utah, Oklahoma City, or Portland. So they belong more over here. And so that's what we're gonna go with. And what we're gonna utilize is, just because we had a lot of paths that did not get used in the division structure, all of these paths are going to be utilized in our A-star method. So every one of these lines is a path that was one of the top 5 of each node. So nodes like Charlotte ends up having, I believe, 15 nodes attached to it because it was in the top 5 of 15 different nodes. And that's just because Charlotte just, honestly, they were not very good over the last 5 years. So they're all going to be put together here. Another team that had a lot was Detroit. You can see a lot of cities wanted to go to Detroit. Same with New Orleans down in the south. And then over here, Utah was kind of the popular one. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to figure out the best path to go from number 4 all the way to number 23. So from LA to Boston, what's the best path to jump from? Is it 7, 8, 9, 13, 15, or 18, 19, 22, 23? I don't know. And that's what we're going to try to figure out. And I think that's going to end up being our last video of this series. So this is going to be what we've been doing up until this point, is producing this network. And it took us 10 episodes to do it, but I did kind of take it slow this time. But this is the network we're going to finally use whenever we figure out the A-star method to go from Los Angeles to Boston. So I hope you guys are enjoying the series so far. I think it's going to be ending soon. I'm going to be looking for some other projects to work on after this one. If you have any suggestions, questions, concerns, comment below. Get a hold of me on Facebook and Twitter. A like and subscribe is always appreciated. And I will see you guys in the next video.